We've got one more topic we'll move on to, and lockdown has done some strange things to certain people. Some people have taken up reading, some people have been catching up on films and TV shows. Lewis, you've sat down and you've tried to restructure the entirety of the Football League.
Yeah. I don't know what more I can say to that.
Why?
Because I keep hearing in the media that teams are struggling. We're going to have this financial Armageddon come August for the Football League teams. Teams are operating at 150, 160% more than their yearly revenue. There's this massive financial black hole. There's contracts that aren't back. Players are going to be effectively out of work and looking for jobs in other industries. And it's all because of the financial aspects of Football League and how much of a mess the Football League is and the National League and the Conference.
Okay, so I've seen bits of this. You've spoken to me about some of it, quite a lot about the League Cup. But if I'll let you have the floor to explain what you've written down, because this is...
And where this idea came from was not... I've been thinking about this pre the current situation we're in at the moment. We was watching a lot of Everton Colliery's games at the start of the season because it's close to where we're situated at the moment. And it came to my attention that they're in the Northern Conference Premier League and Northern Premier League, whatever they call it. It's in old money, it's the Conference North. And there's a little bit of an oddity that, knowing where you're from, Aidan, very far down south, that in the Conference North, a team called Gloucester was in the Conference North, playing against teams who were situated in the north of England. Now, we know I'm not the best at geography, given the Barcelona situation, and being absolutely amazed that there was a beach, considering it was in the middle of Spain at one point.
Yeah, no, but you're a little bit better off knowing where Gloucester is.
Yeah, so, and I'm like, what's going on here? So, it then came to my attention that South Shields would have to travel from Newcastle all the way to Gloucester to play games on Monday or Tuesday night after these players, a lot of them are semi-pro or even amateur, have been to work all day. And then that massive trip, play a game of football, turn and burn, and then straight back up. It's effectively like it's a 10-hour round trip for a game of football on a Tuesday night. So clearly there's got to be a better way of doing it. And then I look up, there's been all the current situation issue financially, what's going on. And you think about into the next division, which is a conference. And I was speaking to a fan of Chorley, and he was saying that he finds it ludicrous how the club's struggling financially just to put the lights on to play games under floodlights. They'd had issues with money, just issues financially in terms of not having enough money to sustain themselves at the level that they're at in the National League. But yet they were going to have to go and play at Dover or play at Ebbsfleet for people who were struggling to get by with normal jobs. And then they got to do all that extra travelling. And the same as you go up through to League 1 and League 2. So what I thought was, is there a way you can regionalise the Football League, make it more competitive and make it more financially stable?
I fully understand the notion of regionalising the Football League because it does make it easier, on the fans and the clubs. Travelling from, like you said, Gloucester up to Newcastle on a Monday night or whatnot is absolutely ridiculous. It sounds easier said than done, mind you.
Don't get me wrong, it's not exactly the easiest thing on the planet to do, but I figured it'd be harder than it actually was because there's kind of an even split throughout League 1 and League 2, and not so much in the conference, but of half and half North and South, what I class North and South teams, putting a line straight across through Birmingham as the divide. Above that is North, below that South, as you'd expect. And you made the point when I was talking to you about this that sometimes lower league fans, the whole weekend experience, what they enjoy doing is all centred around football, travelling 300 miles to go from Lincoln all the way to play Yeovil. What I thought was to get away around that, so you still got the opportunity to have these away days at the other end of the country, you put more onus on the EFL trophy.
The EFL trophy it's an odd trophy in that it is only for League 1 and 2 teams and Premier League academies, which I find extremely strange. So to get the EFL trophy to be a one that people want to win, one that's worth winning, it does need changing. First things first, get rid of Premier League academies, because we discussed the possibility of, say, Everton and Chelsea's under-21s get to the final at Wembley. There'll be nobody there.
Which then becomes the laughing stock that it'll be Manchester United's reserves versus Everton's reserves, and that brings into itself another topic that needs to be discussed, which is why was the reserve league of the Premier League abolished? Because it was perfectly functional and perfectly adequate for what it did in terms of giving younger players a taste of proper men's football at that level, and also being a place where players who've been injured could go and get 30, 45 minutes of rehab or match fitness before they get put into this match day squad for the Premier League teams.
But I do think already, though, is our rounds of the EFL Cup, I don't know if it's called the Johnston Paint Trophy anymore.
It's got a group stage in now, though.
Are they not regionalised? Because I'm fairly certain you only play North and South.
Yeah, until they get to Wembley.
Already. Yeah, well, yeah, because last year, was it Portsmouth, Sunderland? So there's a North and South team going there, yeah.
That's regionalised. But what I've done in terms of League 1 and League 2, we know the financial problems that a lot of clubs are facing. It's highly touted in the media. You can look that up for yourself if you feel like it. Travel's a massive, massive cost for teams, particularly the massive geographical spread across England in terms of conference teams are situated in Hartlepool, which is all the way on the east coast, northeast coast of England, all the way down to Dover, which is near enough France. That if you could eliminate that, you'd save a lot of these clubs money, and you'd also make them more competitive and build a better league and better structure. Because for me, as we've seen with Bury, we've seen with Bolton, Macclesfield, Southend United, teams that are facing extinction, there's got to be a better way, both financially and to make them more competitive. So what I did was, you'd have a League 1 North and a League 1 South would be effectively the top tier of the second tier of Football League, with the first tier of Football League being a Premier League and a Championship, which would stay relatively unchanged apart from there being 4 teams relegated from the Championship, not the current 3. I'd have 16 teams, both in League 1 North and League 1 South, same for League 2 as well. I'd abolish the conference and go from there with, you play 15 home and 15 away ties, 16 teams in each league. There'd be promotion, champion would get automatic promotion, then the 4 teams under that would go into a playoffs, as you do normally, 2 legs of a semi-final and a final at Wembley, and they go up into the Championship. And then you'd have 4 relegation spots in League 1. You'd have 3 go up automatically from League 2, and then 4 through 7 would be your playoffs. And then from there, relegation in League 2 would be 2 teams getting relegated. What do you think of that?
It's a tricky one. I think I agree that the regionalisation is good. I think it cuts costs, but it's splitting up the leagues is difficult. I think to have a perfect north and south divide, obviously this is not, this isn't concrete. To have a perfect north and south divide, to have equal leagues, to have a certain amount of teams going up, because you can't have 2 southern teams going up and 1 northern team going up. It has to be 2 and 2, or so it has to be even numbers going up. You can't have 3, because you can't have 1.5 teams going up from each league.
No, that's why you got 4 in a Championship.
Yeah, so you have to have even numbers go up and down all the time, because it's unfair that in the Northern Division you're playing for 1 promotion spot, whereas in the South Division you're playing for 2.
So the way you get around that is, in the Championship, everyone would know whether there was a North or a South categorised club.
Yes, you'd have to even go as far as the Premier League, because you've seen teams like Sunderland drop down to League 1 and 2. So every club would have to then be given a category of whether you're North and South throughout the entire Football League. So should for example, Manchester United get relegated to League One somehow, it looked possible at the start of the season, they would know that they're going into the Northern League One before they even get there. Granted, for a club like Man United, it's fairly obvious, but take Coventry or Birmingham, for example, should they happen to get that far, it would be a bit more tricky to, without labelling them with what they are, to know where they were going to go.
Yeah. And then what I propose to avoid that 3 southern teams and 1 northern team being in the bottom 4 of the Championship would be a dynamic relegation system where the 2 lowest point northern teams and the 2 lowest point southern teams would go down.
Yeah, because again, relegation has to be equal to for clubs, depending, there should be no differentiation depending on their geographical location.
No. So then critics would say, well, you're losing then 16 games of revenue for a season for teams because they're only playing 30 league games home and away for each 16-team league. So to what I say to that is you'd split the leagues then, League 1 and League 2, in half, like they do in Scotland. I know you're not a big fan of it, but for me it works. And then the lower 8 play each other home and away, which is 8 games, and the top 8 play each other home and away, which is 8 games. Get your 38 games, like the Premier League runs on 38 games. So you're losing another 8 games you set there. And that's where you bring in the EFL trophy, where you get your away days. And they'd both be set. You could play anybody then between any of the 64 teams, in my perspective, League 1 and League 2.
My problem there is you're losing 8 games, and so then you chuck in the EFL Cup. If you go out in the first round of the EFL Cup, you're still losing 7 games of revenue. I mean, obviously, I don't know how much money you saved by regionalising it, whether it works out that you're making up for the lack of gate receipts to 7 games because, for example, you're using less petrol getting from Gloucester to Newcastle.
Easily going to save money there. Then it would add more. You say about, if you go out the first round, you miss losing 7 games, whatever. Because
half the teams will go out in the first round.
But then you add that competitive nature to that competition. And that there is the thing of making the EFL trophy more lucrative and more sought after to win for these clubs.
Is it though? Because the FA Cup adds more games for the Premier League teams, but they don't want them. They're more than happy to put out lower teams so they play less games.
True. And if teams are not looking to gain financially through revenue from
because they saved
the EFL
in petrol money,
then they can concentrate on getting promoted. And losing the conference as it stands today, the National League, would be teams would say, that's a massive issue. But it's not, for the way I've worked it out, and I put the league structure that I have up on MatchDay Review after this podcast, that there's only 7 teams who effectively would get relegated from the conference as it stands today into the conference North and South. And my argument to those teams would be, you're closer than you ever have been to the Football League, because you win promotion from an effective semi-pro league of the Conference North, Conference South, whatever they call it today, and go up, win that division. You're then in the Football League, and the riches that come with a Football League.
It's a difficult one to work out fully. This is obviously you've only done a draft, so to speak, of it. This isn't an in-depth thing. You tried to fix the Football League whilst working at home at the same time, so it's not like it's finalised. But I mean, I'd like to say, actually, if you're still listening, well done.
Well, you tell me my.
If you haven't turned off by now, congratulations.
Yeah, you say my restructuring of the Football League is not riveting. Listening for the earlobes or eardrums, whatever.
It's interesting when you go into it because you will constantly get problems that pop up, like losing 7 games a season, or the fact that semi-pro league is now only 1 league away from the Football League. Are you diluting the quality of the Football League when they get there? Things will always pop up, and I think taking it the angle that clubs are constantly losing money and betting red on the Premier League for the riches that come with that, something has to change at some point. And I think now more than ever it's being highlighted that these clubs are running on the means that they no longer have.
Yeah, and I'm just use a bit of creativity, come up with an alternate option for teams to make themselves more viable and sustainable, whilst also not taking away or adding extra hurdles to get to the Championship or the riches of the Premier League. And hopefully, if clubs were regionalised like that, you'd have younger players who'd be able to play more in the first teams of these teams and be able to bring academy players through more than going getting your established 32-year-old seasoned pro at that level.
Yeah, and I'm all for the use of academy players, but my one gripe was your angle on you somehow became pro League Cup.
I wouldn't say I'm pro League Cup, and I was just thinking of a way that you could kind of add more games so that teams aren't losing some what would be effective 10, 12 games a season. And what I thought was the League Cup would become a 9-round competition now, and I've worked it out how you bring in the Championship teams in the 4th round, then you bring in 12 teams from the Premier League in the round after, nothing the round after that, and then the top 8 come in at the quarter-final stage, not the quarter-final, the last 16 stage. And it then puts added emphasis on getting into European spots in the Premier League, taking away all those effective, nonsensical games that Premier League teams find a bit of a chore early on in the season, particularly when they're trying to get established in the Champions League or Europa League group stages.
Again, though, I have a few problems. So the first, so you propose that the 4th round is the round the Championship teams enter.
Yeah.
So for the first 3 rounds, it's the EFL Cup effectively. You're whittling away half of the Football League in the first 3 rounds.
Bear with me, I've got it wrote down in this book.
We actually have notes. This is the first.
Organised notes that I could put my hands on straight away. It's a MatchDay Review Podcast first. It's a miracle, one could say. But I'll go 64 League 1 and League 2 teams. Would then come down to 32 and then come down to 16. You'd add your 20 Championship club, 20? That not be 24? I think I've shot myself in the foot here. Anyway, you'd add 20 teams in at that point in the 4th round. You then would add the 12 Premier League teams in the 5th round. Nothing in the 6th round. And then the last 16, which is the 7th round. You'd add your 8 Premier League teams in there.
Okay, so you're adding the 8 biggest, I would assume, Premier League teams already at the last 16 stage. Who were the last winners of the EFL Cup?
Manchester City.
And the season before that?
Manchester City.
And the season before that?
Possibly Manchester City.
And the season before that?
Possibly Man United.
Okay, so you're giving these teams an even better opportunity of monopolising this cup that other teams just simply aren't interested in because they can't compete.
A trophy's a trophy, Aidan.
And you're introducing fresher, big teams into the mix at the latter stages.
I would get rid of a 2-legged semi-final. So there is some positives.
So by some, that you'll get lower league teams will make it this far because obviously they're only playing each other. So say a League 1 North team sneaks its way through to the round of 16. They've played 7 rounds of League Cup football.
To then draw Manchester United and have a massive payday.
With fresh legs, so they're going to get knocked out.
But they get to play at Old Trafford.
But are they going to get a massive payday because are Man United fans going to turn up? Oh, okay, man, it might be a bad example because they might, Old Trafford has usually got quite a few people in it.
So use Manchester City as an example.
So they draw Manchester City.
Yeah.
At the Etihad. They're 7 rounds deep into this competition. They're facing the 3 times holders of the cup, 3rd team in the 7th round. They get pumped 9-0.
Burton Albion got smashed 9-0 in the semi-final.
And immediately Manchester City are into the quarterfinals, having played 1 game. It's not perfect, I'll put it that way.
It's not perfect, but it takes away the fixture congestion that the top end of Premier League clubs worry about. You're not losing the League Cup or another trophy. Granted, if push came to shove and you say you've got to have the League Cup as it is now, you've got to abolish the League Cup, for me, you get shut of the League Cup. But to have the 4th effective trophy available in England, Champions League, Premier League, FA Cup, League Cup, for me, I wouldn't want to lose that opportunity of winning a trophy.
No, I think that's where the difficulty comes in of helping the League Cup, is that you don't want it. The trophies are so hard to come by. They're so limited as they are, and obviously Manchester City having a pretty much domestic dominance, a vice-like grip on all the domestic trophies. It's difficult. I'd be all for trying to bring the EFL Cup back up to prominence to give teams lower down the pyramid a chance to win a trophy and have a day out at Wembley.
I'm just using this is just something I come up with this week. It's just showing that there's always other options for the Football League and for English football. Everything isn't just this cataclysmic doomsday event that particular sports media in the UK try to paint it out as be. There's got to be a better way to run these football clubs that have run for 20, 30, 40, even sometimes 100 years successfully in England, that all of a sudden, just because the Premier Leagues have this massive financial boom, that every one of these clubs is putting the longevity and stability of the club at risk just for a chance at a piece of the pie in the Premier League. I feel there's got to be a better system than that.
Yeah, I'm sure that if you were to get people in a room to discuss it, maybe more in depth than we just have, and look at it maybe slightly longer than you have, obviously you have just over the weekend, because obviously isn't a finalised plan or anything, that something could get sorted out rather than immediately pulling the trigger on what is quite a historical trophy in English football.
I can't be arsed with any more meetings at this time.